JJ, NFL training camps are opening. Players are returning in the best shape of their life. When was the last time you were in the best shape of your life?
I mean, look, if we're talking like age adjusted, I feel pretty good right now. Like the last couple years, all that. I feel decent age adjusted wise. Best shape of my life, I don't know, probably like college or something like that when I was running a lot more and I could, do a 5K in a pretty decent time. What about you?
Yeah, it's rough over here in these parts. I'll be honest, I haven't touched a weight since Keenan Allen was a freshman at Cal.
I'm JJ, and last year I tried my hardest to become a best ball bro. I drafted over 500 teams, I talked to some of the most successful best ball players in existence, and I admittedly had mixed results. So this year, I'm going to chase that title once again. My plan is to max enter DraftKings Millionaire Maker, and I'm going to document all of it while talking to the brightest best ball minds on the planet. Last year, I didn't quite get there, but this year, this is going to be the year where I officially become a best ball bro. This episode is sponsored by DraftKings. There's no better way to lock in your fantasy dominance early than with Best Ball on DraftKings, where you draft once and ride your roster all season long. And right now, DraftKings is giving all customers a can't-miss offer. Draft one, get one. Enter a lineup in the $15 million Best Ball contest for just $20, and you'll score another Best Ball ticket to play free for a share of that $15 million, giving you a second shot to win big. It's easy. Just draft your dream team once, no weekly management required, and let your top scorers automatically start each week. Across the whole season, every breakout star, every clutch play, every touchdown will count towards your quest for a share of $15 million. I'm drafting over there all the time. It's an absolute blast. So download the DraftKings Daily Fantasy app now to draft your $20 best ball lineup to play for a share of $15 million and get a second ticket to play free for a share of that $15 million. That's two chances to win big without ever setting your lineup again. Draft one, get one, only on DraftKings. The crown is yours. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. In New York, call 877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY to 467-369. In Connecticut, help is available for problem gambling. Call 888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org. 18 plus in most eligible states, but age varies by jurisdiction. Eligibility restrictions apply. Void where prohibited. One per customer. Enter the Best Ball $15 million headliner contest by 9/4/25 to get one bonus entry. $20 entry fee required. Reward expires in 30 days. See terms at DraftKings.com/NFL-best-ball. Sponsored by DK. Now back to the show. Welcome into another episode of Becoming a Best Ball Bro. I'm JJ Zacharyson, joined as always by Rich Ryan. Rich, what's going on, buddy?
Doing great, man. Hope springs eternal. Camps are in session. Guys are running around in shorts. Xavier Worthy caught a bomb earlier today from Patrick Mahomes. I'm all the way back, baby.
Did you see the viral tweet of Dak Prescott throwing a deep ball and everyone assuming that it was a George Pickens catch? It was the first play of training camp, right? This is what the video claimed, and it was a troll job, right? It was actually Brandon Cooks from last year, and they ran it on ESPN as George Pickens.
That's amazing.
Yeah, it's pretty good. It's pretty good. So like that kind of stuff is also happening right now, which I think is hilarious. And, I'm sure that someone drafted George Pickens around earlier just because of that alone, even though it wasn't even him. But yeah, man, I'm super pumped. This is the time of year where, things really, really start to ramp up, doing a lot more drafts. I did a pros versus Joe's draft the other day. It was a best ball format. I think that came out pretty strong. I felt good about it. Been doing these Millie draft streams. I'm going to do one right after we record this over on the YouTube channel. So if any of you are, listening to this show and you're like, how is JJ applying this? I hate whenever I talk about myself in the third person like that. How am I, JJ, applying to this? It's just easier to communicate that idea. You can check out youtube.com/@lateroundff. I'm trying to live stream every day. Now, I know it's very sporadic because I basically do it. I'm like, I have an hour of time here, so I'm just going to fire up a live stream. We still get a lot of people jumping in and having a good time.
That's why you hit the subscribe button, you get the notification, push notification on mobile, email as well, and you can hop in there. It's not that hard, guys.
That's right. So you guys can watch this show on YouTube as well. That's youtube.com/@lateroundff. it's a chill vibe. Like I try to just talk about whatever. We talk football. Obviously people ask questions, but then I'm also talking like, we talk a lot about like 90s nostalgia stuff and video games and
your Mario Golf updates, your quest for Metal Mario. Did you get Metal Mario yet? That's the
I have not
quest
gotten
right
Metal
now.
Mario yet. I've been grinding Mario Golf, and folks who have been watching that know that I've been grinding Mario Golf 64. That is Mario Golf 64, the alpha of the Mario Golf franchise, Mario Golf 64. But we have conversations like that while drafting. It's a fun vibe. 45-minute streams, hour-long streams. Definitely check that out. But Rich, we have news this week that we have to talk about. I have a lot to get off my chest with this news. So I'll just get into it. Rashee Rice, I was drafting him. I had 9% Rice in the millie before this news dropped, which could have been worse. Could have been way worse. 9%, just a little bit more than expected. So it's not that big of a deal for me. But I also have seen a lot of, and this is kind of a rant also, but I've seen a lot of the, I don't know if it's cope. I don't know what it is, but there's a lot of takes out there with this Rashee Rice stuff. So I'll take a step back. Rashee Rice had a court date that was set for January. Okay. So generally the NFL will punish players after justice has been served. So they go through, all their court stuff. I'm not a lawyer, clearly. And they go through all of it. And then the NFL says, okay, this is what the law said. This is what your punishment is by the league. Here's how long you're suspended. And so with Rashee Rice, for that incident that happened, I guess last, what was it, like April or something like that, well over a year ago, the idea was, he's not going to go to court until January. So therefore, he's probably not going to be suspended again this year. It's probably going to be more of a 2026 thing. That was it seemed like, based on what lawyers were saying on Twitter. And look, no one should be throwing those guys under the bus, guys and gals under the bus. Similarly, we shouldn't be doing that with doctors on Twitter and stuff. Similarly, we shouldn't be doing it to, forecasters like myself. Like, we're all trying to just use the information that we have and project based on probability. And for whatever reason, I think that the Twitter docs and even the lawyers in these cases are like, this is why you don't listen to them on Twitter. It's like, no, this is a probability driven thing. You're not looking at how many things they've gotten right? You're only worried about the things that they got wrong. And so in this case, there was it seemed like a 90% chance, if not better, that this suspension would be happening in 2026. And so Rashee Rice ended up pleading guilty to some charge, right? And so now that moves up the timeline so the NFL can say, we're going to suspend you this year at the beginning of this year, more than likely. And so now we're sitting here with this upcoming looming suspension for Rashee Rice, and the projected suspension at the moment is all over the place. You get some people saying 2 to 3 games. Other people say it could be up to 8. I've kind of just been in the 4 to 6 range in the way that I've been projecting this. And, I sent a tweet out that this was a day after the Rashee Rice stuff went down. I sent a tweet out that said, I got Xavier Worthy just now, because obviously there's a domino effect of Rashee Rice being sidelined. I got Xavier Worthy at 507 in this draft. This was a day after the Rashee Rice news happened. And Rashee Rice went at the same exact spot that he was being drafted before, at the 2-3 turn. And then I was going to take Xavier Worthy in the 4th round, but I took Breece Hall. He just ended up falling. And then I just got Xavier Worthy in the 5th. And I was met with a lot of responses. And I'm not saying this to complain about social media. I'm saying this to get everyone in the same mindset and to sort of communicate where I'm at with the Rashee Rice stuff. A lot of the responses were, the suspension's not that big of a deal for Rashee Rice because it's the beginning of the season, and in best ball, we care so much more about the playoffs and the end of the season. Because if you think about it, there's 3 playoff weeks, and if you want to section this season off into quarters, there's 4 quarters where, the first quarter and the first phase is that the long regular season, and then hopefully you can do well in your league and you move on, and then you move on, etc. Right? And so the idea is that you need way more upside at the end of the season than you do at the beginning, in the larger chunk, because you are going to be competing against really good teams at that point in time in the playoffs. And so this idea that the Rashee Rice suspension doesn't matter because the playoff weeks are more important is just completely lost on me. I think that's just horrific logic. If that's the logic you're using, then in my opinion, you should be unbelievably overweight on Chris Godwin, on Brandon Ayuk, on these talented wide receivers that are being pushed down because clearly they could miss some time due to their injury, right? And maybe those people are. right? Like maybe that's the way that they are approaching best ball. But to me, you're still playing the market. Like me drafting 9% Rashee Rice is still an L because now Rashee Rice is going to be a 4th round pick. And if he's a 4th round pick, I think he should be like a 4 or 5 turn guy. And right now he's more of like a 3-4 turn guy. But if he's going in the 4th round, I lost equity with that pick. I lost value in that pick by getting him at the end of the 2nd round instead of the end of the 4th or the beginning of the 4th round, right? So that's an L, right? Just as I was a little bit underweight on Xavier Worthy, for a lot of reasons I talked through in the late round draft guide, I was underweight on Xavier Worthy. His ADP rises. I actually oddly like Xavier Worthy now more than the market does. So I'm actually drafting him, but I'm drafting him at a disadvantage versus where I could have been drafting him 2 weeks ago. That's where I think this is really missed is that, and this is where I think this podcast series and me going through this journey of becoming a best ball bro has opened my eyes a lot of like these contests. And we talk about it all the time. These contests that are from May until August, right? You're playing the ADP game just as much as you are just playing the I'm drafting the right guys game, right? Like that's so important. I know that you have some ADP info too about like some of the movement and what's been going on over the last week, but that's my general take on the Rashee Rice. And I like Xavier Worthy more because obviously we get more of a boost from him at the beginning of the season. But I think there's not enough discussion about like, and look, I have a lot of like, I think there are red flags of Xavier Worthy's like profile and what this could look like, a lot of variance to what this could look like in 2025. But at the same time, I also recognize he was a good prospect. He's a 2nd-year player and he's in an offense where they're going to need somebody to really step up without Rashee Rice there. And if he does establish himself, that could have a good effect on Xavier Worthy himself through the end of the season, just based on the first 6 games of the year. So like, this isn't just it's just 6 games where Xavier Worthy might see a bump in target share and he's not the same kind of player as Rashee Rice anyway, so who cares and blah, 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 blah. To me, this is what if this offense really, really starts to thrive with Xavier Worthy in a certain role and that role is then sticky when Rashee Rice does come back. I think that's a very real possibility.
And then you got to get into football shape and get back into the acumen of playing pro football. So, I mean, the longer the suspension is, the more troublesome it tends to be. ADP data you referenced, teed up. Rashee Rice, I mean, this is what you're saying. The market has spoken. He's down 16.6 spots week over week, 16 in the month of July. And that's the entire market telling us that he should be drafted at least a round and a half or close to a round and a half past what he was being drafted prior to this plea deal that he made. And I'm with you. I'm not seeing this in reality. This is saying he's an early 4th round player. I'm still seeing him, again, anecdotally, get drafted in the 3rd round, mid to late 3rd round.
Yeah.
So obviously platform wide, it's happening more frequently than in the drafts that you and I are doing. But the market has spoken on this thing. And I love the point that you brought up about those other injured players. If we are throwing caution to the wind at the beginning of the season, then it's a fair strategy to have if you are being consistent with those other players coming off of injury and entering the season with an injury.
Yeah, and look, I understand that the response to that could be like, oh, that's injury versus suspension. Well, number one, Rashee Rice is also banged up, but he seemingly has been 100% since like May. So even like my point is that if you're not worried about the games missed, and if you think that Godwin and Ayuk will be fine when they come back, which, you might be sitting there saying no, but I would argue even if they aren't 100, even if you get 90% Chris Godwin when he comes back, he's still a value if you're not discounting the games that he's going to miss at the start of the season. Like if that doesn't matter to you, then you should be drafting the guys who are going to miss some time. I'm just going by that logic of like, what's going on with Rashee Rice right now. To your point about what we're seeing in our individual drafts, the one thing I've noticed with DraftKings, the way they do their ADP, it is a lot more reactive than other platforms in that, like, I think the way their calculation must work is that they are weighing most recent drafts a lot more. And so that allows for this is just me speaking and not having like talked to them or like really dug into it. This is just what I seem to see, but it seems like they will weigh more recent drafts more than other platforms will. And then therefore those guys will fall a lot quicker. Like another example of that was Ricky Pearsall this past week. So Ricky Pearsall, by the time you listen to this, he might be off the PUP list, but Ricky Pearsall was on the PUP list because of an injury that he had sustained over the offseason. That was kind of a surprise to people. And Pearsall fell in ADP, like, or at least in drafts that I've done. Like, I've gotten him a round and a half after he typically goes, like, pretty consistently. So, like, I do think that DraftKings ADP is a lot more reactive, which is not a bad thing, but I think that that's important. And us saying that anecdotally, we're seeing Rashee Rice still go in the third, or I still have done drafts where he's going at the 2-3 turn, and to me, that's telling that there are a lot of people out there drafting on DraftKings that aren't super, super in tune with what's going on, which means when there is news that drops for these players, it will have some sort of effect on their ADP. And that leads me to speaking about Jordan Addison, because Jordan Addison is in a similar spot where he is likely to be suspended for this DUI this season. Typically, we've seen this be a 3-game suspension. Some others are saying that it won't be 3, that it'll only be 2 games. But regardless, let's say it's a 2 to 3 game suspension. I had a really good conversation on one of the live streams with somebody this past week who, he believes that Jordan Addison is still a really good value right now if he were to miss 2 to 3 games. And my point in not being overweight on Addison, because I don't even disagree with that take. Like, I think that it's fine if you want to get Jordan Addison right now, or if you think that he's a value right now. My stance is I'm anticipating when this news drops that he is going to fall in ADP, right? And so if he falls in ADP, going back to what I just talked about, I want to play the ADP game a little bit more. Not only that, we're into this season, into this best ball season. If Jordan Addison falls to different parts of the draft, it's a little bit different with like middle round picks versus early round picks. You can get some more unique combos and different combos than other teams might have been getting if he's just been going consistently at the front half, because he's usually in like that, late 6, early 7 range, which means the front half of the draft is usually the ones who are taking him. If he falls half around, then all of a sudden my Nico teams are getting, and Brian Thomas teams are getting Jordan Addison, which is totally different than what the rest of the market has been doing thus far. And so the idea with Addison for me, I've drafted him a little bit, but I am waiting for this hammer to be dropped, because I do think that, even if it's 9 out of 12 teams know that Jordan Addison is going to miss 2 or 3 games this year due to suspension, that's not enough. There's still going to be people who are drafting him at ADP, because there's going to be 3 or 4 teams per draft that just have no idea of what's going on, which tells me that once they do know what's going on, his ADP will fall.
And with Addison, it's already challenging enough to make Lions and Viking stacks, because those top end players that are getting large reception share and high production are very hard to draft, because you need to be in certain draft slots. So even getting a round of relief, half round of relief, and getting Jordan Addison and getting another player in that round, like you said, to help those teams elsewhere is really helpful, because it's just, I find it terribly difficult to be making these Lions Viking stacks.
Yeah, and like I said, I think the example I should have gone with is Amon-Ra St. Brown, right? Who is always a back half kind of player. Sometimes he'll go into the second, but usually a back half of the first round player, which means if Addison then falls there, based on this suspension, you're going to get a lot of value, not just on Addison himself versus where other teams were drafting him, but also in that game stack. Like, I just think we're giving the market, and maybe this is wrong of me, and people are listening to this and they're disagreeing with me. Totally fine. I'm becoming a best ball bro, and I'm trying to take what others have told me and apply that knowledge and that logic to the current situations, right? So I could be totally wrong here. That's the whole point of the show, is that I'm just being transparent and walking through my process and stuff. But I just have a hard time believing that the market, that especially on DK, where people are doing, and like I was in a draft today. I did a live stream with Connor Allen over at 4for4, and we did a DraftKings live stream. Someone took 4 tight ends in the first 7 rounds of the draft, right? Like, I have a hard time thinking that the market has this full, complete grasp on Jordan Addison's value with a 3-game suspension. I have a very hard time grasping that. And I also think there's at least some chance that people have no idea this is going on, and they see a 3-game suspension and they're like, they take it even further than it needs to go. Cause we know, as someone who's drafting, to the point, to the pro Rashee Rice side, to the pro Jordan Addison side, if the suspension's happening at the beginning of the season, that's when fewer injuries have gone down. That's when there's no bye weeks. So it's a lot easier to fill that roster spot and that slot when those guys are sidelined. So oftentimes we probably shouldn't bump these guys down too much, right? And so I am still on that side, right? I'm just saying that we need to bump them down at all, right? Like, it needs to be shifted. But there undoubtedly are going to be people who are like, oh, he's going to miss 3 games. There's no way I'm drafting him, you know? And if that's the case, and if you get a handful of those people and they're all in the front half of the draft, then all of a sudden Jordan Addison's ADP falls. It's not that hard for it to fall. And so that's where I'm at. I think the one thing that's keeping Addison afloat a little bit, or could keep him afloat, is that that's kind of an area of the draft where things start to suck. Like you're already seeing Stephon Diggs rise a lot right now based on his, ACL news and him being healthy. And I think part of that is, number one, yes, Stephon Diggs is good and we like Drake May and we're really bullish on New England getting better offensively this year. But I think part of it also is like, well, who is he leapfrogging? And who he's leapfrogging are dead zone running backs. You know, it's like Aaron Jones and maybe Caleb Johnson, or maybe he's not Isaiah Pacheco, better example. Like, he's leapfrogging those guys that we don't really feel that great about anyway. And so that's one reason why maybe Addison doesn't fall back too much, but I do expect some movement with him.
Yeah, I was going to say back to back right there. 2 late round specials in Stephon Diggs and Travis Kelce in that range. Yeah, that's very much a yuck range where it's like, do any of these guys support any of the stacks that I'm going for? Please God, because I don't want any reason to click these guys.
And I think that's reason why I've kind of gravitated towards quarterbacks in like round 9, because even if they're unstacked, because there's just not much going on at running back and wide receiver after a certain range. Like I like, if I can get Emeka Egbuka, great. If I can get Darnell Mooney, great. But there's just a lot of guys there that I feel like I can get their production in round 13. And so I'm not going to reach for those kinds of players.
I was this close to selecting 3 quarterbacks in a row the other day in 8, 9, and 10. Yeah, it would have been a masterclass, but unfortunately, Trev T-Law went a couple picks for me. I already had Travis Hunter, so I was really excited, but I didn't get to pull the trigger.
The last one that we got to talk about is Quinshon Judkins. So, by the way, how much has Addison fallen over the last week in ADP?
So Addison is down 3.5 spots week over week, 7 spots in the month of July. So there is a bit of a slide already happening, but like you said, in a more reactionary market, if there were a suspension to come down, you'd likely to see that number crater for sure.
Yeah, I think, the dude I was talking to in the live stream, we made like a little side fun bet. Like, I will openly, say that I was wrong if he's right and whatever, that kind of deal. It was fun. It was all in fun. And look, he brought some good logic to it. So I don't want to say that anyone's going to I don't think that my stance is like 100% correct. But I think the over under that was set was around 6 spots. And I smashed the over. Like, I do think that, based on where we were this past week to where Addison will be post suspension, it will be over 6 spots. I think it'll probably be closer to a full round to 12 is my guess.
Yeah, which would be in line with Rashee Rice just pleading guilty, right? Rashee Rice hasn't had his suspension handed down either, and it's already in that 6 to 7 spot round range.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people feel, better about Rashee Rice's projection too. Like they're pretty bullish on, like, there's a lot of people who are like, people take sides on Rashee Rice versus Xavier Worthy, and you get a lot of people in both camps. But again, in drafts, you only need a couple teams to be very high on that player for that ADP to be sustained. So that's something that we have to always keep in mind. With the running backs out of Cleveland, Quinshon Judkins still doesn't have a deal with Cleveland, still has not signed his rookie contract. And then obviously there's the off the field stuff going on, which is horrible. But now we have to react as fantasy managers and drafters and say, okay, what's going to go down? Now, I wasn't really drafting Judkins to begin with because I was fearful of his receiving profile. It's a full PPR site. But then on top of that, Cleveland's likely not going to be that good of an offense and of a team this year. So how many like really favorable games, Chris, was Quinshon Judkins going to see here in 2025 to begin with? So that was a fear that I had with Judkins. I think I drafted him once before all this went down. That's not a brag. That's just to establish where I was at with his backfield, right? So in turn, I was drafting a lot of Jerome Ford. If you guys go listen to some of the older live streams, he was always like an 18th, 19th round dart for me, because the logic was, I think in a scenario where they're in a negative game script, they'll use Jerome Ford in the role that he's played historically. He's the veteran. Like that's the kind of go-to 2-minute drill kind of running back that they would deploy. There was some coach speak about Dylan Sampson lining up in the slot, getting receiving work. I was kind of skeptical of that because Sampson was not that much of definitely was not a plus as a pass catcher in college, right? But he is a smaller, shiftier back that I would assume a team would want to get him into space to do some work. He's also not bad between the tackles, despite being a smaller running back. He was really good in short yardage situations. So I think Dylan Sampson, the reason why, when you look at this situation now, I think people should be smashing Dylan Sampson at his current ADP to get as much exposure as you can, because this Judkins stuff does not look promising, and it doesn't look like it's moving at a very fast pace, right? And so if Sampson assumes more of that Quinshon Judkins role, and you're not spending a 6-7 turn pick to get Sampson like you were Judkins, that's really attractive, because to me, early down work is a little bit more replaceable in the NFL than like pass catching work would be. But also, I do think that if they want to deploy him more as a receiver than what I projected for him coming out, then that's a coaching decision. And maybe they do that at the end of the day. And so to me, without Judkins in the lineup, it benefits Sampson more, because Sampson's going to just now have a legit early down role more than likely, and then have some pass catching upside. Whereas Jerome Ford gets a little bit of an uptick, but I think has sort of a similar role that he was going to play anyway, which was still a valuable enough role because of the negative game scripts that Cleveland was going to see. So in my opinion, I'm still fading Judkins. I don't know if there's a price where I would draft him, because there's unfortunately a very real chance that's like a dead spot for you this year. Like, we can't just assume that things are like, I think that there's better than not chance that he plays this year, but I don't know what that really looks like. And I don't think it's necessary enough to like be aggressive like you will with Rashee Rice, who could be that like league winning player, right? There's a totally different kind of scenario. So that's why I'm not going after Judkins that much. I think Sampson is really, really intriguing at like that 13th round price tag that you can get him at right now. So I'm leaning into that. I'm still drafting Jerome Ford, but yeah, that's where I'm at with the Cleveland backfield right now.
Judkins down 22 spots, Sampson up 24 spots. So the market is aligned with you there. It's getting to the point where, man, if I'm not stacking the Browns Steelers game, it's really hard. As someone who's going to have a finite number of shots at some of these contests, like this game has the lowest total in week 17 at 40.5 points.
That's right.
It's really hard for me to hover my mouse over any of these running backs in click draft.
The other thing with the Browns, I've mentioned this before, but like Jerry Jeudy, I'm lower than the market on in season long, and I'm even lower on Jeudy in best ball than I am in season long, because we don't know who to stack him with. We have no idea right now what quarterback is going to be the quarterback in the most important weeks of the season. And so it's really, really difficult. Like, we feel pretty confident, I would say, about 30 to 31 of the NFL teams out there. Like, even the Giants, I feel pretty confident that Jackson Dart will be starting during the playoff weeks this year. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe Russ really surprises and they play really well. But, we feel confident that there are like 4 different choices for Cleveland right now as to who their starter could be. And so when you don't have that flexibility with stacking, it should bump a dude down at least a little bit. Like if you're contemplating Jacoby Myers or Jerry Jeudy, I like Jacoby Myers just straight up more, I think. But regardless, like, I'm going to just draft Jacoby Myers, especially because it gives me another out later on in the draft with Geno Smith, just to get another player to stack. So I do think that goes a little bit unnoticed. I'm having a really hard time with the Browns. Even David Njoku, who I've loved historically, have had as a player to target in the draft guide, and I've talked him up. There's some bad trends about middle round tight ends like him who are in bad offenses. The only guy that's really smashed has been Brock Bowers, and he's generational, over the last 10 years. So even Njoku, he's the one guy I've sprinkled in the most probably, but I'm only probably at like 4% Njoku just because this Cleveland team is just so frightening.
Yeah, Jameis was, such a good fit for Njoku. Just somebody who's going to hit that back foot and just throw it as hard as he can at 85 and try to make a play. And yeah, if there's one thing that I think we talked about this previously that we're looking forward to hopefully getting some clarity on here in July with camps in session, is some clarity as to who the Browns quarterback will be this season.
Yeah, I should shout out Cedric Tillman too. I've drafted a little bit of Tillman just because of price, and he gave us some ceiling games last year before he got hurt. So I do think that Tillman's okay. I just have a really hard time with Jeudy at the end of the day. But anyway, let's get to our guest, Adam Levitan. You guys know him from Establish the Run. Used to work at Roto World and DraftKings as well. So I have back-to-back shows with a DK Pro because we had Kitchen on last week, and now we have Levitan on this week. I really like my conversation with him. It was a lot of fun. Always good to chop it up with Adam. But we talked about the benefit of softer draft rooms, which you often get with DK. There's like one or two teams just doing some wild things. And I think it's only going to become more and more, we're going to see it more and more as we get into August, people wanting to draft. I already had some casual fantasy football playing friends message me and say, what's the best platform to play best ball? And I'm like, go to DraftKings. So like, if that's the demographic that's joining, no offense to him, to my buddy, but yeah, we're in good shape. But we talked about the benefit of softer draft rooms, the looming suspensions. So we have more discussion about what we just talked about with Rashee Rice and Jordan Addison, and Adam talks through his process and how he sort of looks at those situations. We talked earlier around tight ends, his favorite stacks, lots of stuff. So without further ado, here is the interview with Mr. Adam Levitan. All right, Levitan, DraftKings is sort of more like Wild West than other platforms. Like, this is my first year of like really going hard over on DraftKings. Seems like people stray away from ADP more often. Do you find that to be more beneficial for the ball knowers or just more tilting for the ball knowers?
Oh, come on, dude. It's beneficial. I cannot take one of my most tilting experiences going on Twitter and seeing people complain that their opponents were playing bad. Right. Where do these people think that EV is generated from? I mean, we know actually where the EV is generated from. We have data on it. ADP value generates EV. Understanding draft capital buckets generates EV. Stacking generates EV. Having strong rankings and or player takes. You know what generates the most EV though? Other people making mistakes, people playing bad, people taking 2 quarterbacks in the first 5 rounds, people taking guys a round plus ahead of ADP. So let's say I'm setting up some stack, I have Burrow I have Chase and T, and someone takes Burrow before I get to him. It takes Burrow way ahead of our rank. That is not a bad thing for me. That is a good thing. I'm going to be fine. I'm going to find other stacks. I'm going to create some backdoor stacks. I'm still going to be fine with Chase and T. There's so much chaos and crazy stuff that happens in the NFL regular season. Just because somebody took Burrow 10 spots ahead of ADP does not ruin my draft and force me to go on Twitter and complain about it. In fact, going back to the poker days, I would take people to the hallway and threaten to murder them if they started tapping the tank from telling opponents how bad they're playing. So no, this is a ridiculous thing that's going on. I'm glad you gave me this platform to get this off my chest.
I'm glad to hear it. It's definitely been something that I have noticed more and more this year, especially is like, I feel like people feel like they deserve certain players if they start a stack a certain way, like especially the Burrow stuff. And I talked about this with Kitchen last week. By the way, folks, a fellow DK pro going from Kitchen to Adam here, but talking to Kitchen last week, it almost feels like people like think they deserve Joe Burrow when they push it, even if they don't get him at the 4 or 5 turn. Like when they push it to 6 at the turn, they're like, oh, why is someone because that's far past ADP, right? Like there's a difference between tilting when it's like you have Puka and Devontae Adams and Matthew Stafford goes in round 7. Yeah, it's frustrating, whatever. But like you said, it's a minus EV move for that drafter. But if you're like trying to push Matthew Stafford past ADP, what's the expectation here? Like the expectation should be that the dude's going to be drafted, especially whenever you're going in, you're drafting amongst people who probably aren't as hardcore as you are about them.
There's so many other things you can do. Let's say someone snipes Burrow from me. Okay, I can take naked Justin Fields at 100 overall, and it's not that big a deal, especially on DraftKings where I think correlation, especially if you're playing the $20, I do not think correlation is as important as it is on something like Underdog where the touchdowns start stacking up. You can get something like 10 catches from T. Higgins and Burrow not have that great a game. Justin Fields could outscore Burrow in week 17 and T. Higgins can still have a really good game there. So on DraftKings specifically, I really don't worry about the stacking stuff as much. Of course, I'm trying to stack. I'm trying to get 3 stack quarterbacks at all times, but I don't worry about it as much. And God forbid, I would never make fun of someone or complain about someone playing bad. My God. Yeah. That is just the worst.
It is pretty crazy. With there being 2 extra rounds on DraftKings, does that change the way that you're approaching drafts, or is it more so, just allowing that flexibility to have deeper stacks and such?
Well, first I would say it's better for us, right? And like if you're listening to this, if you listen to any of our stuff, like it's better for us. You need to know. Like I had already taken a couple Elijah Arroyo shares before this Noah Fant thing, and I just feel like the smartest man in the history of the world now. I never would have been able to do that if there wasn't 20 rounds, right? So I think it's an edge to people that understand, oh, Noah Fant might get cut or whatever. But yeah, I think it's important to think through what the current best, and it's always changing, but what's the current best round 19 and round 20 values? I don't think it's that quarterback, right? They're all gone. Yeah. It's 20 rounds. I want 3 quarterbacks on most builds. Actually, mostly because to advance in the 3 playoff weeks, you want to give yourself the ability with 3 unique stacks hitting at different times, right? But anyway, like even Anthony Richardson and Tyler Shuck and Rodgers, all those guys are gone by round 19 and 20. So it's not quarterback. It's not really wide receiver. I don't think. I do take some Tutu Atwell. I take some A.D. Mitchell. I take some Malik Washington. But, even guys like Dante Thornton and Darius Slayton, like those guys are usually gone by round 19 and 20. So really, when I'm thinking through right now, what are the best picks in 19 and 20? It's running back and tight end. And therefore, I'm more willing to leave draft capital for 19 and 20 there. Jarquez Hunter, DJ Giddens, Brashard Smith, Keaton Mitchell. I've taken Trevor Etienne. I've taken Sean Tucker. And then at tight end, if I get caught, it's not ideal. I think it's better to totally punt tight end on underdog where TD luck means everything. Yeah. On DraftKings, I don't love it, but if I have to, Jatavian Sanders, Tyler Higbee, Noah Gray, Juwan Johnson, Theo Johnson, rookies like T. Ferguson, Fannin, like you can add a 3rd or even 4th tight end in round 19 and 20 on DraftKings that you wouldn't do in an 18 round draft. So to me, that's the adjustment that I make. If it's close for me in round 14 between, say, a quarterback or a tight end, I'm like, you know what, man, I'm going to take a quarterback here. Yeah. And if I have to, in round 19 or 20, I'll get some tight end that I can at least live with.
Yeah, 100%. I totally, that's been my experience too. I mean, like a guy like Tyler Higbee, like, are we going to be shocked if he has like 75, 80 targets this year? I don't think that would be like that crazy. And you're not able to get that, like you said, at wide receiver, it's more difficult. It's at least more volatile. Like we know that those guys have roles. So, and then a lot of those like day 3 rookie backs just seem to be like easy. What if something happens in camp or what if like Trevor Etienne, for instance, had decent draft capital and we're just kind of assuming that he's behind Rico Dowdle and won't get much run. Well, what if that changes? I think that's that's sort of the vibe that I've got, that I've noticed and gone with these round 19, round 20 picks is that like the opportunity cost realistically, what are the chances that those guys are going to give you something to begin with? Right. And so let's throw the dart of the guys who can actually give you something or some upside there.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, when the first year when I won on DK, Isaiah Likely was a huge round 20 pick, huge part of my week 17 team. And then 2 years ago, all my best teams, all the success that I had was because I was taking a little bit, not a lot, a little bit of Puka and Kyron in rounds 19 and 20. And like, do not throw away those picks at all. Like concentrate, make good picks, find guys that can have some upside for you late in the season.
Something I have to talk to you about because people are going to be asking and wondering, and you guys obviously do a lot of detailed work with your projections and stuff and your rankings and whatnot. We have these looming suspensions, right? We have Rashee Rice, the news drops last week, his court date, forget about that, happening in January. He pleads guilty. So now we're expecting a suspension coming for him. Jordan Addison, we're expecting a suspension coming for him. Quinshon Judkins, he doesn't even have a contract right now, so who knows what's going to happen with Judkins. Yeah. How are you handling that sort of situation? Because obviously these guys fall on ADP and their ADP shifts, but is it a situation where you blanket and you say, I'm going to play this conservatively? Is it a case-by-case thing? How do you approach these suspensions that are sort of looming right now?
So first of all, from a projection standpoint, we can dock a guy, by however many games we want in the projection that'll flow through to rankings. It's more complicated than that. Because I don't want to dock Rashee Rice for missing weeks 1 through 4 as much as I would if he was missing weeks 11 through 14. And so we try to reflect that in the rankings the best we can. And I would be trying to think through that. One thing that you see with the Rashee Rice stuff, ADP is taking a long time to crater here because people are still auto drafting. They're missing picks. Some people don't know he's about to be suspended on DraftKings or whatever. And so his ADP, it's going to take a long time to get to where I would take him, which I think is somewhere in the 50s, I think is right for Rashee Rice, roughly. Just generally on these guys, though, I would say understand the team that you're building. I cannot take all rookie wide receivers. I cannot take all rookie wide receivers with suspended guys. These are guys that are like going to underperform early and hopefully overperform late. I can't have an entire team of that. So I think as people start to like get advanced more and more in best ball, it's not just thinking through the individual player and their range of outcomes. On this team, how many guys do I have that are likely to perform well early in the season versus late? How many fragile guys do I have in terms of their floor? And I'm always trying to like balance hey, I'll take some Jacoby Myers here with some Matthew Golden or something like that. You know, something boring and steady with something that also has a big chance to hit late. And so I think about that with the suspended guys too. If I have a solid team, maybe a boringish team, all right, give me some Rashee Rice in the mix. You know, maybe I'll even take a Jordan Addison, you know, ahead of ADP or something like that, because I don't care about a 2-game suspension early in the year. So I would encourage people to think through their team as a whole. The Judkins one, though, I haven't taken him not once. Not once. I'm just like really worried about that. And I don't think it's that great of a spot anyway. So I've just been totally out on Judkins.
Yeah, that's where I was at too. I'm like, look, he might not be that much of a pass catcher, just given his collegiate profile. I know my model wasn't like totally in love with him. It was fine with him, but it wasn't like, oh, this guy's a must have and like a true bell cow. And then you layer on top a horrific offense or potentially horrific offense given the quarterback situation. Negative game scripts. Is he even going to be on the field? Right? Like there's just a lot of red flags whenever Travion Henderson and RJ Harvey are being drafted right above him, you know, in these drafts. So it was just like difficult to go after him. So I'm in the same boat where I think I had like one milli draft that I had drafted Judkins. And now I'm just like, what's really the point? I'll throw some darts at like Ford and Sampson at this point, but it's difficult to go after Judkins. You mentioned the quarterback stuff a little bit in your answer earlier and how, you know, if you're in round 13, 14 and you're between a quarterback and a tight end, you'll just go quarterback because, you know that you won't be able to get a starter later as easily. It feels like we're in this really weird cycle on DK where these QB2s just keep rising and they're like there's not a big difference necessarily between like the true mid to low end QB1s, like, you know, Bo Nix and Justin Fields and Kyler Murray or whomever. And then like literally a round and a half later, people are taking like CJ Stroud, right? Yeah. So how are you handling quarterback right now? Are you reaching or just drafting, I guess I should say, that Fields range and then kind of just seeing where things fall? Are you pushing it a little bit with these guys? Like, how are you approaching the position?
Yeah. So quarterbacks are going to go faster than people think because there is a limited number of them. There's a finite number of them. I can come up with hundreds of running backs you could take late, hundreds of wide receivers and tight ends, whatever, that you can take dart throws on. That doesn't exist at quarterbacks. So they just keep getting pushed up because people are like, oh, Adam said we need to get 3. I better start pushing it up so that I make sure that I get 3. And the dynamic that JJ is referring to is certainly scary, right? I like JJ McCarthy, Drake May, Jordan Love, Herbert. I like Stroud a little bit.
Right.
Prescott, Caleb, Purdy. I've been living in that range. To your point, though, I've been thinking through it more from like a stack perspective. Like I get a lot of these guys as part of front door stacks. And I know with the Bears, I can always get backdoor stacks with Loveland and Burden and stuff like that. I can always get backdoor stacks with Jordan Love too, with Romeo Doubs, Kraft, something like that, etc. But I haven't thought through it enough probably that from a raw quarterback projection perspective, they're going too close to guys that I really like. Like you mentioned, Dak. I think Bo Nix is going a little bit too high for me. But yeah, Dak, Purdy, Mix, Fields, McCarthy, those are probably my favorites in that range. And yeah, they are probably going too close to the Stroud guys. But if like you're baking a lot of teams, I just want exposure to a lot of different quarterbacks. And so I'm pretty flat in terms of my quarterback exposure through there.
It seems like just from a best ball perspective, like strictly best ball, season long, obviously it's a little bit different, but like last year was my first year really max entering. This year I'm max entering again and playing a lot. And it just is a natural, like flattened exposure at the position if you're stacking.
Right.
I have a strong opinion about Baker Mayfield and Jared Goff in season long. Like, I think they're both avoids. Like, just doesn't make much sense to go after them. But if I'm drafting Mike Evans and I'm drafting, I guess Emeka Egbuka would go after Baker. But if I'm putting together a Lion stack, I'm naturally going to just draft those dudes because I still want that spiked week. So do you think that's the main reason we see that flat exposure at quarterback at the end of the day?
Probably. Yeah. Probably. For sure. Yeah. And I mean, like, we do have just like on a raw basis, we have Baker well behind his ADP. We have Caleb a bit above his ADP. We have Nix behind his ADP. So like we have stands on these guys, but like you said, I'm more willing to be in line with ADP if I already have the stacking partners. And that's how you get that really flat dynamic. Yeah, I do think quarterback's like a more interesting discussion for season long right now than it is for best ball.
Yeah, 100%. All right. So with this being a full PPR platform, do you find yourself going with more zero RB builds, wide receiver heavy builds than you would on like an underdog? Or are you still, because like the market doesn't necessarily suggest you do that. So it's a really weird situation to be in, where on one hand you're like, yeah, I should be going more wide receiver heavy because the wide receiver is probably going to hit the flex more. But then at the same time, like ADP wise, it's not any different. So how do you approach that sort of dichotomy?
Yeah. To me, there's a macro question, right? Do you think, and I'm actually curious your take, JJ, do you think last year's running back outcomes were an outlier? And by running back outcomes, I mean health sustaining at an outlier rate, leading to 6 guys with 300 plus carries, 13 guys with 250 plus carries. And then also just a general shift of NFL philosophy towards the run. Only 9 teams last year had a positive PROE. If you think that was an outlier, this is an incredible year on DraftKings specifically, in my opinion, to go hero RB or zero RB. If you think that this is the trend in the NFL, everybody's going to start running the ball a ton more now, then you're going to get your teeth kicked in like I did last year playing a very heavy zero and hero RB strategy on DraftKings. So I have more thoughts, but I'm curious if you think last year was outlier with the running back stuff or not.
I do, especially the RB2 range. The RB1s really didn't perform, and I mean like top 6 guys, top 7 guys, whatever. They didn't really outperform like the historical top 7 running backs we've seen. It was really in that RB2 range. Like those guys were like 3 like solid points per game ahead of what we'd seen from like RB15, RB16. And a lot of that, in my opinion, comes down to the fact that they stayed healthy. We know that factually, like we can measure that through games played. They stayed healthier. And when those running backs stay healthy, that means backup running backs aren't stepping in. Because we know, like, yes, we know that handcuffing running back is much easier to do than handcuffing wide receiver, let's say, just because we know that those guys will be getting more work when they step in, and it's an easier position to just step in and play. And so, we can look at a backup running back and say, you're going to be more valuable and more viable with an injury than a backup wide receiver would be, because it's not as talent driven as it is at wide receiver. With that being said, they're probably going to see like 70 to 80% of what the starter would see. And so when you get more injuries at the running back position from those RB2s, let's say, even the RB1s, but I'm just saying like how they finish, like those RB2s, when you get more of those injuries, that means that production is going to be like 80% of what we saw last year, as opposed to the 100% that we saw, because all these dudes just ended up staying healthy. I do have a hard time though, and this is what I want to throw back to you. I have a really hard time on DK sometimes falling behind and feeling, because like if it's not, like you said, it's not like quarterback in that there is a finite number of players, right? But, and trust me, I do more hero RB than I do, going like 2 RB starts or anything like that. But I'm still going 2 RB starts at times because of the way the market dictates things, and because wide receivers will still often fall because of people drafting running backs a little bit higher. So how do you adjust to that?
What you're describing is why I started playing best ball on DraftKings more than anywhere else, 3 years ago, because the ADP of wide receivers was lower, was, worse than on Underdog, which was half PPR with no bonuses. The wide receiver DraftKings scoring is so lean towards wide receiver. And so for me to get wide receivers later on DraftKings that I could on Underdog, I thought that was the biggest edge that you could find. Now, last year, it hurt me really badly because I was passing on Josh Jacobs and James Conner and Alvin Kamara in favor of like wide receiver 2s that I knew weren't like the best wide receiver in the world. Yeah. And like, I was like consciously doing that. I'm like, oh, what are these idiots doing? And then Josh Jacobs and James Conner and Alvin Kamara and Derrick Henry and Saquon Barkley and all these other guys just shove it right down my throat. Right. So I understand the bet that I'm making here again this year. And yes, to answer your question more directly, I am willing to get behind at running back again this year on DraftKings specifically in favor of elite tight end and elite wide receivers. Like, I think those are what you need to win on DraftKings, those guys hitting in a big way, and then betting on chaos at running back. And so, I could pull up my exposures right now, but I have tons of the RB2s of the backup RBs. I have tons of like hero RB with like maybe 1 running back in the first 5 rounds, 1 running back in the first 6 rounds, and not worry about running back again until like rounds 10 through 15. It's a risky bet, but I understand the bet that I'm making, and the prices that we get on this is better than last year because of what happened last year. Like JJ said, people are now actually taking running backs really high on DraftKings. So yeah, it's complicated, and like you can hedge across sites. On Underdog, I'll take way more running back early, but yeah, that's the bet I'm making on DraftKings, at least for this year.
Yeah, no, it makes a lot of sense. The ironic thing about this though too is that pass catching running backs that have like a more locked in role. I think the easiest example of this is like Justice Hill, right? Where the Ravens are going to see 5 to 7 negative game scripts this year, probably. And in those environments, maybe Justice Hill gives us 3 to 4 usable weeks just based on the fact that he'll be on the field, right? And like in a half PPR environment, that's not nearly as usable, right? Whereas the beauty of best ball is that we're not having to predict those game scripts. Like in season long, we got to say, I'm going to start Justice Hill this week. Well, Baltimore could just lay an egg against a bad team, and then all of a sudden they're in a negative game script against like the Titans or something. And you're like, how did this happen? And you're not starting Justice Hill. So I do think that like the weird part about this discussion too, and why I do like Hero RB a lot. Number one, because we know that elite running backs are very, very obviously beneficial in fantasy, like regardless. But like you're only going to get those guys generally in the very, very early rounds, hence Hero RB. But there are a lot of like just the satellite back Austin Ecklers of the world that are just like sitting there that aren't sexy at all, that like will more than likely give you some usability, while things develop, while guys get hurt, and while some of these rookies start to emerge a little bit, right?
Yeah.
Like that I think also gets missed a little bit in this discussion.
Sure. And there's also, some backup running backs are going to smash if there's injuries. So like I have a ton of Algier.
Right.
I have a decent amount of Garendo. I have a ton of Rashad White.
Yep.
I have a decent amount of Trey Benson. I have a little Ray Davis, like all these guys that are like one injury away from pretty good roles. That did not hit at all last year. But these guys are so cheap now that I have plenty of them this year.
Yeah, 100% with you. All right, so if you're not drafting as many running backs early, does that mean you're in on elite tight ends, or are you out on elite tight ends?
Yeah, so we run a little bit conservative in our season-long projections, and we still have Trey McBride for 128.1 targets. We still have Brock Bowers for 134 targets. For reference, we only have Puka Nacua for 139.9, Brian Thomas Jr. for 131, et cetera. And so in full PPR on DraftKings, the separation that you get with someone that can rack up 10 catches at the tight end position is just absurd. Like Brock Bowers going 10 catches for 90 yards and 0 touchdowns on DraftKings just smashes the baseline tight end expectation. On Underdog, I'm just like, man, I'll take 3 tight ends late and I hope one of them gets a touchdown. And it can't be that far off of the elite tight ends. So yeah, I think Bowers, McBride specifically on the volume stuff are much better on DraftKings than anywhere else. And I do take them there. The other thing is tight end panic can set in and like we get a bunch of overdrafted ones. Like, I think Kelsey goes too high on DraftKings at 78. I think Mark Andrews, given his volume concerns, goes too high at 102. Tyler Warren, I like, but he goes really high. Tucker Kraft, likely. I like them all, but man, they go really, really high. Whereas I think Bowers and McBride are fairly priced. And so if you look at the tight end position as a whole, I do think Bowers and McBride are really good picks on DraftKings. Yeah,
no, I'm with you. McBride especially because there's a shift in like opportunity cost where he goes, right? Like at least with Bowers, he'll fall past like those really elite wide receivers. And that's where it's like obvious to go after Bowers, But with McBride, he's never in that range. You're taking McBride over like T. Higgins or something, and you feel a lot better about doing that as opposed to where Bowers goes. And then what you said about those like mid-range tight end ones, I mean, even in season long, like if you look at ADP, I did a study on this a couple weeks ago, and not very creatively just called it the tight end dead zone. I hate the phrasing and the term, but like tight end 7 to tight end 18 historically, there's literally been zero correlation with how they've performed. So there's really no reason to reach for a lot of those guys. Sprinkle in some exposure, that's fine, but like there's really no reason to be overweight on a lot of those players. So I'm with you lockstep, with that take. Are there any stacks over on DK that you've been gravitating towards?
Yeah, we have done the Best Ball Explorer thing. We can see who we've like stacked most. My most is the Cowboys. I just expect them to be very pass heavy. Yeah. And I know like you're the king of this stuff, JJ, but when guys have bad touchdown rates at the quarterback position as a pocket passer, that's like the most likely thing to regress. Same as, I'm sure you'd say why you're fading Baker or Goff is just absolutely outrageous touchdown rates last year that are going to regress. And so these pocket passers that fit well on DraftKings, like if Dak hits in a big way, it's going to hit through Lamb, Ferguson, Pickens. And so I really like Cowboys stacks here. I have a lot of Chiefs. Speaking of touchdown rates, I think Chiefs are going to get back on track for Mahomes being an elite touchdown thrower. Once again, first Rashee Rice I thought was too cheap. Then he got expensive. Then Worthy was too cheap. I also like Hollywood, so that was a good one. The Bears one I mentioned is just like emergencies, I get in trouble and I know that if I take Caleb, I can get Loveland and Burden really, really cheap. I don't feel that comfortable with DJ Moore or Swift. I think Rome is okay, but I get into the Bears backdoor stuff a lot. I mentioned Packers. I'm curious what you think about this one, but I did not think the Packers intended to be so run heavy last season. They get the Jordan Love injury and then just kind of like give up trying to throw the ball. To me, that's not their game, man. They should be throwing way more. And so I have a decent amount of Packers stacks also.
Yeah, I actually I have a regression show that will be out by the time this is out. So people have already heard that. But the Packers are part of that show where last year their pass rate was a lot lower. Like under Matt LaFleur, they're typically in like the 56% range or something like that. Last year they were at like 48%. And teams that are in the 46 to 50% range since 2011, only 5 of the 36 ended up decreasing their pass rate the following year. So a ton of them just throw the ball more. And honestly, like the Packers are a team, I hate to use this as an excuse, but in my opinion, it's a better and best ball type team, right? Where like, we don't know if there's going to be a true dude who emerges out of that wide receiver group or if Tucker Kraft does or what have you, but their ADP is going to probably be pretty consistent from best ball to season long, when I would argue they're more valuable in best ball just because of the predictability aspect, right? So like you said, there's a lot of backdoor stuff that you can do with Jordan Love too, where you get Love, you can get Tucker Kraft, you can get Romeo Doubs. Do you guys have Romeo Doubs like way ahead of ADP? Because my stuff is just really like Doubs this offseason. And it's scary because he's such a boring pick. Like it's not a fun dude to be overweight on, but it's really hard for me to not draft Doubs often, especially when I'm going in that Packers direction.
We're at 140 overall on DraftKings on Romeo Doubs. ADP is 166.3. Normally, players come to us, like if we have a guy 25 spots ahead of ADP, enough people are using our stuff that it comes to. Romeo Doubs doesn't come to us at all. No one wants Romeo Doubs. So he's been in that like 166, 168 range. I will say, you can cut the better and best ball stuff a few ways. I do think guys like Doubs, Jacoby Myers, they get like a bad rap in best ball because people think they have no ceiling. You need usable weeks, man.
Yes.
You need usable weeks. And so I think, those guys can be fine in best ball, also the boring ones.
It's also kind of BS in a way too. I don't know if you agree with this or not, but do you think that we just overstate our ability to predict the high ceiling stuff? Like Romeo Doubs had a crazy stretch in the playoffs a couple of years ago where he was scoring touchdowns. He's a good red zone threat, all that kind of stuff. Like, do you think that there's a lot of that going on with the discussions?
Of course. It's like, somebody misses a tackle and Jacoby Myers goes for 80 yards. They're like, see, I told you Jacoby Myers had a ceiling. Like, it's like people have no idea what's going to happen. Yeah, of course.
Right.
Just give me the targets and we'll figure it out from there.
Yeah, 100%. All right, let's just talk about some individual player takes. Are there players that you seem to be avoiding on DK in the single digit rounds?
Oh God. Yeah. You mentioned that third round where, you can get McBride, you can get the quarterback sometimes. I have 0 Marvin Harrison. I haven't clicked him once. It scares me.
I'm low on him too, man. It's scary.
It scares me a little bit. It's just with the same staff coming back.
Yeah.
I'm not like convinced that they'll change the way they used him last year. And I also didn't even think he was like that good last year outside of that Rams game, the first half or whatever, made some crazy plays. Maybe a more controversial one. I have very little Mike Evans. You lose your offensive coordinator again. You bring Chris Godwin back. I think you bring Chris Godwin back for week 1. You add Emeka Egbuka, and then you get Mike Evans, just to me so much better in touchdown heavy formats. Like he was put on earth to score touchdowns. And so if you think Baker's going to regress in touchdown rate and they get a new offensive coordinator into the mix and they add Egbuka and Godwin's back, it's tough for me in the reception category for Mike Evans. And then another one that's scary that I've been thinking about lately with the Noah Fant thing is I have stone cold 0 Cooper Kupp. I just keep going back to the Cooper Kupp was like Sean McVay's best man. Like it's like they love this guy. Matthew Stafford like hangs out with him. He has breakfast with him all the time.
Man. Yeah.
And then Cooper Kupp's like, they didn't even like reach out to me about coming back. Like they were just like, you know what, we're done. That's scary to me when the guys who know you best and love you just decided you're done. You can go to a division rival. So those are 3 receivers that I have very, very little of. Certainly always scared, but hey man, got to make a stand somewhere.
Yeah, no, I'm with you on each of them. The Marvin Harrison one probably scares me the most, but I'm with you that like it's just really hard. Like I like Devontae Adams more than Marvin Harrison,
definitely.
So like it's just really difficult for me to go, in that direction. When
what about JSN versus
I have JSN ahead of Marvin Harrison too, but like
definitely on DraftKings where like JSN 3-yard catch is worth a lot. Yeah,
and I'm like, talent level wise, are we like I think that we would say we don't know right now if one's better than the other, and I think environmentally, like JSN could easily walk into a 25% target share next year.
For sure.
So who are the guys, last question, who are the guys that you're drafting a lot that we need this year?
Yeah, I have the guy I've clicked the most times so far this year, and I've already done something ridiculous, like 80 drafts or something. The guy that I've clicked most is George Pickens.
Mm-hmm.
Price is starting to come up now, but I would chase him up the board a little bit here. People don't seem to want to draft Saquon, so I take Saquon as high as 2, but sometimes he gets to me at like 5.
Mm-hmm.
And so I end up with a lot of Saquon. I don't normally like getting super overweight round 1 guys. Trust me, guys, I'm well aware of how many touches Saquon Barkley had last year. You guys hopefully know my take on running back injuries, which is every running back projected for 200 plus touches is likely to get hurt this year, is a favorite to get hurt this year. So yes, is Saquon likely to get there? Of course. I can say that about every running back who had 250 plus touches. So yeah, I have a lot of Saquon and Pickens early. In the middle rounds, Worthy and Olave. I just thought when Rashee Rice was steaming up and Olave was going down, that was just not enough respect on Xavier Worthy and what he was able to do in the second half of last season, really in all areas of the field. And I want to bet on Mahomes this year. And Olave, just if he stays healthy and if Tyler Shuck is even like remotely capable.
Yeah.
The per route stuff on Olave is so striking. I just have to take Olave when he's there at like 65, 70 overall. So I have a ton of Olave. And then also I have a ton of Shaheed also. So what could go wrong? You know, a ton of 2 Saints wide receivers with Tyler Shuck.
The Saquon Barkley discussion is really important. I actually sent a newsletter about this last week where I looked at, you know, touch totals and how they differed from one year to the next. And I think that humans just like want to put a narrative around it and say that it's injury based. And maybe there's something small to that because there is like if they had over 300 touches, like their games played the following season. But like, we're not talking about like hundreds of running backs here, right? There's like 24 or something in this bucket. I think mostly it's really freaking hard to maintain 300 plus carries year over year.
Of course.
Right? Like it's just a difficult thing to just generally do. So we just naturally see them lose a couple carries per game, you know, as they go from one high volume season to the next.
Of course. And yeah, I mean, the Eagles offensive line is going to be dominant again. They're going to score a ton of touchdowns again. It's like, it's really hard. I think Saquon's going to regress in his yards per carry, I'm sure,
right.
But he's still going to smash, you know, in my opinion. So
yeah. Love it, man. Love it. Thanks so much for joining. Let everyone know where they can find you and what you guys are doing over at ETR.
Yeah, you can find all of our stuff for best ball and anything else fantasy related on establishtheRun.com. If you're watching, I don't know if you're watching this on YouTube or pod only, but if you are watching on YouTube, we have a bunch of free stuff on our YouTube channel as well. You can just search Establish the Run.
Yeah, definitely check them out. They're all pals of mine. Check out their tools. You know, there's a lot of stuff too. Like we've talked about this plenty in the past that like there's just natural overlap of like stuff that I'm not doing that you guys are doing and vice versa. So definitely check them out. As always, guys, check out lateround.com. Check out the draft guide available for sale right now. Make sure you subscribe to the podcast. Check out the YouTube channel, all that good stuff. Otherwise, thanks for tuning in.